I noticed a tiny detail in my husband's handwriting on a random grocery list. It changed my entire life. Have you ever looked at a photograph of a happy memory and felt a sudden icy shiver because you realized the person standing next to you was wearing a mask? For 7 years, my husband Arthur was my absolute rock. He was a quiet, meticulous accountant who loved gardening and spent his Friday nights organizing his collection of vintage fountain pens. He was the kind of man who checked the tire pressure on my car every single Monday morning just to ensure I was completely safe on my commute. Our relationship was built on a foundation of absolute, boring, beautiful predictability. Our life was a collection of comforting, unbroken routines. We had a small house with a white fence, a golden retriever who slept at the foot of our bed, and a shared calendar on the refrigerator that mapped out our entire existence weeks in advance. Arthur was fiercely private about his past, claiming his childhood in a distant state was lonely and uneventful. I respected his silence, assuming it was just a small, harmless quirk of his introverted personality. I felt incredibly secure, believing I knew every single corner of his gentle, quiet soul. The illusion began to unravel on a rainy Thursday afternoon over something as completely insignificant as a grocery list. Arthur had rushed out to a business meeting, leaving a handwritten note on the kitchen counter asking me to buy milk and honey. As I picked up the paper, my eyes lingered on the way he looped his capital letters. It was an incredibly distinct, old-fashioned cursive style. A heavy, familiar weight dropped into the pit of my stomach. I recognized that handwriting, but not from any note he had ever written to me. 10 years ago, before I met Arthur, my older sister vanished from her college campus. The case went completely cold, but the police had found a single, haunting note left on her desk from an anonymous admirer. The handwriting on that note had been etched into my brain for a decade. It featured the exact same peculiar, double-looped cursive letters that were currently staring back at me from Arthur's grocery list. A wave of dizziness washed over me as a terrifying, impossible thought took root in my mind. I spent the next 3 weeks living a double life, playing the role of a loving wife while conducting a silent, desperate investigation. I waited until Arthur was deep asleep, then slipped into his home office, carefully picking the lock on his private filing cabinet. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the flashlight. I bypassed the neatly filed tax returns and dug into the false bottom of the drawer. My fingers brushed against a faded velvet box hidden beneath a stack of old bank statements. I opened the box and the breath was completely sucked from my lungs. Inside lay my sister's silver charm bracelet, a piece of jewelry she wore every single day until the afternoon she disappeared. Alongside it were dozens of candid photographs of her, taken from a distance through a telephoto lens, all dated months before I had ever met Arthur. He hadn't met me by accident in a coffee shop 7 years ago. He had targeted me, using me to get closer to the family of the girl he had stolen. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place that evening when Arthur returned home. He smiled his warm, familiar smile, walked into the kitchen, and kissed my cheek. He asked how my day was, his voice dripping with the exact same gentle tone he had used for 7 years. I looked into his eyes and realized that the man I loved was an absolute fiction. He was a predator who had built a perfect marriage just to keep his prize close, watching my family's grief from the front row. I kept my voice completely steady, smiling back as I handed him his dinner. I didn't scream or confront him. I knew that if he suspected I knew the truth, I would become his next permanent secret. I am currently sitting in my car at a gas station down the street, my sister's bracelet hidden in my pocket, waiting for the police to surround our home. The psychological safety of my entire life was completely dismantled by a single loop of a pen.